Hey everyone. So this week I wanted to talk to you about case studies. Last week we talked about third-party selling, and now we're going to utilize everything from last week to actually go about creating the narrative form of your case study. Ultimately, case studies really truly create trust with prospective clients, allowing for you to be able to increase the likelihood that they're actually going to buy. And the thing that I see happen so incredibly often is that they see the work that this industry does as purely subjective. We actually perpetuate this in a number of ways, from utilizing your website as essentially a portfolio and not really being able to actually have a very clear understanding. And this is, I would say, 9 out of 10 times when I look at case studies, that is more often how they're oriented, is in a subjective manner. Having the actual person that's reading it actually look at it and just needing to evaluate based on the creative, not understanding the story behind it, not understanding the challenge, not understanding the objective. And ultimately, they're not creatives. Even though sometimes they may think they are, they're not creative to the point that they're able to actually distinguish and understand the use. And even for creatives to go through and evaluate the effectiveness of the work that you've done is extremely difficult when they do not understand the story behind it. And so what ends up happening is that when you're not actually selling in a way that allows for them to understand that you have done this and done this multiple times and you ultimately have the authority. So this increases their confidence that they have in you, reduces the amount of risk that they actually see, but also allows for you to actually have a bit more authority when working with them, and ultimately allowing for them to feel more secure and safe. When someone feels more secure and safe in your process and in your agency, you're able to actually be more in control of the way that you work and ultimately of the relationship, rather than actually having the client in the driver's seat. Not saying that you are not going to need to work with the client and take information from them and all of that, is that ultimately they're going to actually recognize how that actually affects them and be able to want to work with you. And so the way that what I actually see happen is that ultimately you've kind of given the client control from the start. You didn't actually have them build confidence in your process. You did not sell on your process. You did not build credibility with them. And you were not prescriptive. You just took orders in the sales conversation. They said, hey, I need a site with 10 pages, and then you give them a price, and then you move forward. And ultimately, they're the ones in the driver's seat, not actually allowing for you to help them accomplish their goal, which I actually think in a number of ways, it's not good for the agency, because ultimately you don't get to work within the process that allows for you to be able to scale. And two, it does not allow the client to get the outcome, because realistically speaking, they don't have the expertise that you do. And I believe this to be an imperative for multiple reasons, and it's good for everyone involved. So the true opportunity here is actually to change the way that you sell. And so let's build out the collateral that you need for this to allow for you to be able to do this in a meaningful way. So I want you to think about this for a moment, and I want you to think about a time that you didn't feel safe, and ultimately that you wanted to take control of the situation. I mean, I'm sure that you've heard the concept that if you want something done, do it yourself. If you want it done right, do it yourself. And that's because so many people recognize that when they are not in control, they ultimately have an increased amount of risk. And what humans do on an ongoing basis is we're always looking and just constantly scanning the world for threats. And what we want to do is eliminate them, allowing for us to be as safe and secure as possible. And the more that we can actually do that, and actually having the relationship with your prospective client that fosters that type of relationship, is going to allow for you to be a ton more successful in the way that you work with them, and allow for the client ultimately to have an increased amount of success as well. So I want you to really think about for a moment the amount of work and the amount of effort and the amount of really everything that people actually put into their businesses. And even if you're selling to someone within the organization, that is their entire safety net. Finances in the modern world are incredibly, incredibly important, and actually in the world in general and history as well, as recognizing that they have so much risk in these scenarios, and ultimately they don't want to mess up. They want to feel safe. So we need to create that safety for them, allow for them to really be able to understand ultimately how they're going to be able to achieve that outcome, and creating the understanding that they are not the guinea pig, that ultimately you are going to be able to help them, and you've done this before with multiple clients in that exact same situation, assuming that you have. So if you pull up your worksheet, there's a couple of things in here, and I'm actually going to walk you through a case study on my site so you can actually take a look for a moment on sort of how it actually would be written and actually implemented fully. I follow the same sort of guidelines myself as I'm recommending to you as well. So I actually had them have a snappy headline, allowing for them to want to continue reading, and a little bit of a summary that allows for them to get intrigued and understand, yes, this is the situation that's similar to me. And then continuing on into the way that we had talked about before is you have the challenge. We're going to have our solution and the result. What I'm going to actually have you take a look at here is that on my site, and I'll just go ahead and browse to the page once it decides to load. So for this particular one here, for example, you have, as I referred to, the snappy headline. It started as a passion project. The agency owners were designers who enjoyed their work so much that they decided to create their own business. And despite none of the owners or executives having owned a creative agency before, they were doing well. The agency had a steady stream of clients and profits were acceptable, but acceptable wasn't enough. The agency owners wanted more. So this is creating a little bit of intrigue, getting you to actually understand sort of the baseline of the situation and what they were looking to accomplish. Then you have the challenge, then what it was that they were looking to accomplish, what it was that we actually did with them, and ultimately the result that they were able to accomplish, having closed $3 million of new business in just a 90-day period of time, creating the framework to allow for them to do that. Having you fully understand and the prospect in that situation fully understand how it is that ultimately we're able to help them accomplish the goal, making them feel more safe, because ultimately others in that scenario have been able to do it before. Ideally speaking, we want to have quite a few case studies to cover a number of different scenarios of clients that we actually work with. The less types of situations that we work with, the more targeted we can actually have our case studies. In a realistic situation, let's start with 2 or 3 case studies. That should be enough to actually get you going. You don't need to have dozens and dozens. You can add them and create them over time. But what I would say is let's go ahead and actually start and utilize the worksheet that is provided alongside this training. And if you haven't received the worksheet, please do comment case study below, and we're absolutely happy to give you a copy of the worksheet so that you can go ahead and start getting writing on the narrative format of your case study. If you have any questions, please do reach out. Go ahead and shoot us a DM. We're absolutely happy to help and want to make sure that you're able to get this essentially what will be one of your number one tools in a sales conversation to allow for you to be able to grow your business. Let us know. We're here to help.